We're fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Sunday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. First of all, last 2 weeks I've been traveling on Sunday, so it's great to be back. We are in our normal time slot, 7 p.m. Eastern. We're going to rock and roll with this time slot basically through the end of not only college football, but college basketball. And let me say this, I know every single week it feels like the Saturday of college football is crazier than the last one. This one we just had was bananas, and this might be a 4-hour show. So buckle in, grab a cold one. I got so much to discuss. Okay, we're going to talk about Georgia, Texas, obviously both the Georgia win, but then also what the heck happened with those refs? I hear people in the media saying it's not it's a big deal. We're going to discuss it. And I think Greg Sankey handled this about as poorly as you possibly could. Might even talk a little Arch Manning, although I don't know if we'll have time for that. From there, we will go to Tennessee. Alabama loses a second game in 3 weeks. We're going to give our credit. We're going to give our flowers to Tennessee. Don't worry, Vol fans. But also, Bama, it feels like it's crumbling right in front of our eyes. We'll talk about USC and Oklahoma. Which team actually has it worse? It's actually kind of a fun conversation when you break it down, unless you're a USC or Oklahoma fan. We'll talk about Indiana. DJ Lagway, did he just save Billy Napier's job? There's so much to get into. Don't want to waste any more time. By the way, make sure you drop your comments in the comment section. We will get to them as quickly as we can. By the way, I believe it was, Jayhawk Trucking that led this thing by saying go dogs off the top. So I want to give him a little shout out. By the way, Jayhawk Trucking LLC, feel free to hit me up. We got to get you as a sponsor and an advertiser on the Aaron Torres pod because we appreciate your support so very much. That would be J-Way Trucking. I apologize. J-Way Trucking. Go dogs. Give me an email. Shoot me an email. Aaron Torres podcast questions @gmail.com. You need to be an advertiser with us. By the way, as we're going live, Oklahoma has fired their offensive coordinator. So, I'll say this. Late October, that's when things start to get quirky in college football. We're going to break it all down. Loaded show. Before we get started, quick reminder, we are brought to you by one of our new favorite sponsors, and that's Blue Chew and BlueChew.com. Fellas, remember the days when you were always ready to go? Well, now times change. You're getting older. Maybe you're a Bama fan. Can't get out of bed anymore. You're sad all the time. Well, I get it. But what you need is an extra pep in your step, and that comes via our friends at Blue Chew. Blue Chew is an online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra, Cialis, and Levitra, but at a fraction of the cost and in chewable form. To get started with Blue Chew, it's easy. Just go to BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. No awkward trips to the doctors, no waiting in the pharmacy, no stink eyes, no raised eyebrows. You don't even have to put on that Bama cap. You don't have to go out in public to do it. It can all be done online. Of course, with that said, I know many of you are probably wondering, Torres, does it actually work? Well, I'm here to say, try it for a month for free, courtesy of the Torres pod. You're going to love it. Your partner's going to love it. Bama football might stink. You might be ready to call it a season, but guess what? Blue Chew will have you delivering like it's the Saban era all over again, okay? So try it out, and here is the best part. Blue Chew has an incredible offer for all of our listeners. Try Blue Chew for free when you use promo code Torres at checkout. So go to BlueChew.com, promo code Torres. They will give it to you for free. All you got to do is pay $5 shipping delivered straight to your house. That's BlueChew.com, promo code Torres to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. Thank you to Blue Chew for being a partner of the Aaron Torres pod. Use promo code Torres. Thank you, Blue Chew. With that said, We have rambled long enough. Not that Blue Chew is rambling, but I rambled off the top long enough. There is no more time to waste, so let's get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, we know where it came from. Beautiful Austin, Texas. Top 5 matchup. We were so excited about this one. Texas, I think by the time the game started, was a 4.5-point favorite. Yeah, Georgia was not having that, not one bit. Final score 30-15 as the Georgia Bulldogs restake their place as the elite team, at least for now in the SEC, and maybe, in my opinion, potentially the number 1 team in America. We're going to get into all of it in a minute, but I thought the best way to actually start talking about this game was to hear from Kirby Smart himself. Here's what Kirby had to say.
Nobody gave us a chance. Your whole network doubted us. Nobody believed us. And then they tried to rob us with calls in this place. And these guys are so resilient. You know what I mean? We talked about intent.
That was Kirby Smart going after everybody, ESPN, the refs. But the bottom line is, I think he was right. And I actually think that statement perfectly encapsulates the entire game. Georgia wins, statement victory. Also, the refereeing controversy, which we are not going to duck from. So let's go ahead and get into this game. First of all, from the Georgia perspective, from the nobody believed in us perspective. Now, Coach Smart, be clear. You can't say nobody believed in you, because I have personally been critical of you, but I've been critical of your team. Could have lost to Kentucky, the Alabama game, but I actually like Georgia. Go back and listen to the College Football Betting Pod, and it was really for 2 reasons. One, do think that Georgia was by far the more battle-tested team coming into this game. You look at it. Listen, that Clemson win gets better by the week. Clemson's a real team now. Georgia destroyed them. Kentucky, up until Saturday night, top 10 defense in America. No shame in struggling to move the ball there. You played at Alabama. So I thought they were more battle-tested. Texas's 2 best wins, probably Michigan and Oklahoma, who have a combined 0 playable quarterbacks among them. But 2, I also really thought going into this one, Kirby Smart was going to use the nobody believed in us card. And by the way, I think he's right. I don't watch College Game Day on Saturdays. Listen, I got 12 hours on the couch plus 3 hours of radio at night. I like to get a workout in, right up until noon Eastern. But I would imagine most of those guys pick Texas. Most everybody else in the media I saw take Texas. But listen, to me, I felt like that was the number 1 reason I like Georgia in this game. It was because Kirby, for the first time since probably the 2021 season, really could play the nobody believed in us card. I believe that he would. I'm a guy that was at the TCU National Championship game a few years ago. He tried to play it in that game. So if you could play it against TCU in LA at SoFi Stadium, you could absolutely play it going into Austin as a 2.5, whatever it was, 3.5, 4-point underdog. But really, as I look at this game, first the on the field stuff. Listen, this reestablished to me Georgia. By the way, my preseason national championship pick, no big deal. They're as good as anybody in this sport. They can beat anybody in this sport. By the way, it doesn't mean that Ohio State's bad, Oregon's bad, Texas is bad. But to me, this says they can play with, they can beat anybody, okay? First of all, the defense was phenomenal, okay? Think about this. Coming into this game, what did we hear? Nonstop. It was that Texas's offensive line, the best in the country, the best we've ever seen. Kelvin Banks, first-round draft pick. They were flying right by that defense, okay? 7 sacks in this game. 10 TFLs. The defense was unbelievable. Thought also offensively, listen, the stats don't bear it out, but part of the reason the stats don't bear it out is because of the fact that Texas has really good players on defense too. But I thought early when they needed to run the ball, they were able to. Trevor Etienne, yes, I was critical of some of his behavior in the offseason. Doesn't change the fact that he is the dude that they need right now at the running back position. So they ran the ball. I thought the defense looked phenomenal. And now if you're a Georgia fan, you got to go to bed Saturday night, wake up Sunday, wake up Monday, whenever you're listening to this, feeling like, man, everything we thought we could accomplish in the preseason, it's all in front of us, right? Now listen, schedule is tough. Tennessee is good. We're going to get to them in a minute. You got to go to Ole Miss. You don't sleep on a Georgia Tech team that played you tough a year ago. But at the same time, looking at this game, what I saw was a team that at its best, they're still as good as anybody in college football, okay? And you look at what was at stake, and we talked about this on the college football betting pod, is if you look at what was at stake, okay, is the reality that if they lost this game, there was very little pathway to an SEC championship. You would have not had a tiebreaker against Alabama or Texas at that point. Now, when we talked about it on Wednesday, we didn't know Alabama was going to lose on Saturday. But two, you would have been on the fringes of the playoff conversation with tough games ahead. Well, now you're sitting at 6-1. I think there's an argument that you might be the best team in college football. Listen, it's no disrespect to Oregon, but 1-point win on a sketchy pass interference call against Ohio State at home. I'm not trying to take away from what Oregon did, but the counter to that is I would argue Texas on the road, that win is as good as any in college football, probably the best. And then beating Clemson on a neutral, top 4 win, top 3 win in college football this year. So Georgia's probably got 2 of the 3 or 4 best wins in this sport. That's another conversation for another day. I don't think any Georgia fan cares about being ranked number 2 right now. I think Oregon fans probably would have been a little upset if Georgia got some of those votes. But the bottom line is for Georgia, they had so much at stake. They showed that championship mettle, that championship toughness. The thought of, you can back us into a corner and we're going to fight back. I got to give them so much credit. Really quickly, I do want to talk about this refereeing situation. And, I'm so disappointed in so many of the media who cover this sport. I don't know if people are not smart enough or afraid to talk about serious topics, but what happened on Saturday night was a travesty. It was an embarrassment. And I think transparently, the SEC right now, Greg Sankey should be sitting on his knees praying to the football gods that what happened in the third quarter did not have an impact on this game at all. Let's get into it, and let me tell you why this is ridiculous, and I actually have an idea to make sure this doesn't happen again. But for people who somehow were missing the game, and if you're watching this show, I can't imagine that you don't know the details. But third quarter, Georgia is in control, but at the same time, Texas is starting to make their move. And I give Texas credit. They didn't fold, nothing like that. But at the same time, we're in the third quarter. Carson Beck throws an interception to Texas. Texas it's an interception that is eventually called off because of pass interference. Now, you can debate, was it the right call? Was it the wrong? It doesn't matter because it was called pass interference on the field. In college football, unlike the NFL, pass interference is not reviewable. Well, Steve Sarkisian got mad. Texas fans got mad. And Texas fans did their best impression of Tennessee against Ole Miss a few years ago. They threw a bunch of crap on the field. Ton of water bottles. I didn't see any golf balls or mustard bottles, but they were not happy. The game gets delayed. And then we come back to the game, and what ends up happening? The referees announced that, oh, by the way, we have called off the pass interference, and it is no longer a pass interference, and it is instead Texas football. Texas ends up scoring. It doesn't end up mattering, but it doesn't change the fact that this was absolutely embarrassing. And again, I heard some people in the media say, who cares? It doesn't matter. It didn't impact the game. It was the right call. Just because it was the right call, it doesn't mean, even if it was the right call, doesn't make the circumstances okay. And again, I believe the SEC's handling of this is nothing short of embarrassing, okay? Because at the end of the day, whatever, the SEC can say, because the SEC's argument is essentially the refs are always allowed to pick up a flag. They're allowed to confer. I don't think anybody watching that game that isn't a Texas fan or working in the SEC offices would say that that call was overturned strictly because it was the wrong call. It was overturned because there was a delay in the game because Texas fans acted rowdy and inappropriate. And when they did, it was clear there were probably some replays on the big screen in that stadium. The referees realized they got it wrong, okay? But at the end of the day, why this is a problem, and Kirby Smart addressed this after the game, and you can see it on the scroll if you're watching on YouTube. Here's his exact quote. We now have a precedent that if you throw a bunch of stuff on the field and endanger athletes, that you've got a chance to get your call reversed. Thank you, producer Matt, for having that exact quote on the screen at the exact time that I'm talking about this, because Kirby Smart is 100% right on this, is that Texas just set the precedent that if you don't like a call, you can basically peer pressure the refs into changing it on the spot. Just throw a bunch of crap on the field, get the game postponed, delayed, whatever you want to call it, and hope that the replay gets shown in the stadium enough where the refs realize they screwed up. Now, thankfully, it didn't impact the game, but that is a terrible precedent that you don't want set, okay? Now, look, I think this starts with the SEC offices. The SEC very simply said, hey, look, the refs are always allowed to pick up. I'm not going to read that. They put out probably a 250-word statement. I'm not going to read all of it. But they put out a statement saying the refs are always allowed to pick up a flag. I fundamentally disagree. We all know why that flag was picked up, okay? We know why it was picked up. We know the circumstances that allowed it to be picked up. And we know that transparently, if there was no crap on the field, it probably almost certainly would not have gotten picked up. So I think the SEC needs to hold their referees more accountable. I've said it for years. College football, NFL, college basketball. I don't understand why referees don't go to the podium and aren't asked tough questions and aren't held accountable like everybody else. Every single coach that lost yesterday, whether it was Steve Sarkisian, whether it was Lincoln Riley, whether it was Sharon Moore, whether it was Mark Stoops, whether it was Kalen DeBoer, they had to go to the podium and answer questions about why they essentially failed at their job. Like, you can argue, but that's what the questions are about. Players have to go to the podium. And the referees just get to skate by, and that's where I'm disappointed in the SEC. You have a moment that allows you to acknowledge these guys got it wrong and they need to be held accountable. I'm not saying lifetime ban, but what I am saying is you cannot allow that to happen, and you don't always have to side with the refs. I understand the idea of wanting to kind of show a united front, but it's the wrong move, and I'm disappointed in Greg Sankey. Let me take it a step further. NCAA, you want some good PR? Let's get some good PR. Because the NCAA, listen, I was at an NIL conference on Friday. Everybody's just crushing the NCAA. They can do no right. I actually feel bad. That's not the point. But what we learned this week from the NCAA is that if they want to change a rule in the rule book, they can do it overnight. You know how I know? The Oregon Dan Lanning 12-man on the field penalty, they changed it literally in one day. We'll do something here. To me, and I put this out on Twitter, had a couple typos, forgive me, I was fired up. This is what I would do. This is what kind of blows me away, by the way. Even if you overturn the call, the fact that there's bottles on the field, that it's not a penalty, doesn't make sense. So this is my proposal to the NCAA. If debris reaches the field that causes a delay of game, you want to protect the refs a little bit, you can do it this way. Debris reaches the field. How about a 5-yard delay of game penalty? And oh, by the way, a 25-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. To me, a dual penalty. A dual penalty in which you get a 20-yard penalty for throwing debris on the field. Because that's the crazy part. Texas not only gets the call overturned, they get the ball right where the play happened after their own fans caused hysteria in the stadium. So to me, like I said, 15-yard unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, an extra 5 yards for delay of game, make it 1st and 30. Okay, you're going to give Texas the ball back. They got to go back 20 yards. That's at least a little bit more fair. NCAA, do it. I don't understand how you could throw stuff on the field and it's not a penalty. But the fact that Texas got away with this, what Kirby Smart said was right. Producer Matt, do you have half a second? Pull back up that Kirby Smart sound because I am fired up. He is absolutely right. He was working against the refs and he was working against the media going into this game.
Nobody gave us a chance. Your whole network doubted us. Nobody believed us. And then they tried to rob us with calls in this place. And these guys are so resilient. You know what I mean? We talked about intent.
They did try to rob him with calls in that place. I know everybody's saying, oh, Kirby's just trying to work the media and he's trying to do the nobody believed in us. I don't care. He's right on this. The SEC should be embarrassed by how they handled this situation. All right. So what we're going to do, I'm fired up. Can you tell I'm fired up? I'm yelling and screaming. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back. When we come back, oh, buddy, we are going to be talking about Tennessee, Alabama. Want to give Tennessee their flowers or maybe their cigars. Maybe that's the right way to put it. We also got to talk Bama because I'll tell you what, Kalen DeBoer, I was the #1 cheerleader. Don't doubt DeBoer. I'm starting to doubt him big time. We'll take a quick break, maybe get to some of your questions. Be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute, but before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions. All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So want to go ahead and get into the other marquee game, Tennessee versus Alabama. Third Saturday in October. You can set your watch to this one. And listen, I got a lot to say about Alabama, but before I do, I don't ever want to make it seem like I am not giving Tennessee credit for this win. Okay, so Tennessee wins 24-17. Their second win in the last three against Alabama, second straight win in Knoxville. And I will say a couple things. One, there is a DeBoer element to this that we have to talk about, but I don't want Tennessee fans thinking that because I'm going to criticize Kalen DeBoer that is in any way taking away from what Tennessee did on Saturday. They got the second win in 3 years, second straight at Neyland Stadium, and we all saw the pictures of the cigar smoke billowing out of the stadium after the game went final. So let's go ahead and dive in. And, first of all, I think the thing that stood out to me as soon as this game started on Saturday afternoon, it was the first time that I can really remember that the team's size, speed, athleticism, talent, they looked exactly the same to me. And listen, 2 years ago was absolutely incredible. But 2 years ago, it was Hendon Hooker versus the world. Okay, it's no disrespect intended to any of the other 85, 84 players on that team. Jalen Hyatt was awesome, whatever. But it was Hendon Hooker putting a team and a program on his back to get that victory. Bryce Young, by the way, was incredible in that game. This year, though, you just watched from the beginning, and it was like these two teams are pretty evenly matched. I actually thought Tennessee was going to win outright, so I'm not totally surprised by the result. But at the end of the day, it just felt different. It looked different. The cigars, it wasn't any less of a win, but it felt like 2 years ago, it was kind of like, okay, this is our moment. We have the right coach. We're on our way. But, oh, by the way, we still got Georgia, and that's a little bit intimidating down the road. This year, though, you look at Tennessee, they're every bit as good as basically anybody in this league. I think they can compete at the highest level. But to me, why I would be excited if I was a Tennessee fan, it isn't just the fact that you beat Alabama for a second time in 3 years. And by the way, maybe Bama isn't that good, but it doesn't take away from the win. But here's what would have me extra excited. The difference between Nico Imamaliava in the first half versus Nico in the second half. You got your quarterback, and I think that was the first real sign that that this kid, we've seen the hype, we've seen the highlight videos, but that this kid might be able to do it in the SEC at the highest level. And if he can, that's where it gets fun because it takes your entire program to another level. And when I think about Tennessee, it's funny. I think about the conversations that we've had about them on this show the last 3-4 weeks. And I want to give myself a little pat on the back because I was one of the few very early, like I was on board like that, right? You go back to the NC State game. I said, this team is for real. Everybody's going to focus on the offense. but they run the ball well. The O-line dominates, and the defense is elite. And so it took a few weeks for everybody else to catch up. By the way, Vegas still hasn't caught up because, 4 of the last 5 weeks I've taken the under in the Tennessee game. None of them have been close. Took it against Oklahoma. I took it in the Oklahoma game. Took it in the Arkansas game. Took it in the game on Saturday. So I guess it was 3 out of the last 4 games. But I bring it up because that defense is elite, and really that defense has been carrying this team. And so it's funny because I go back to some of my commentary 3-4 weeks ago, and my initial thought was probably, you know what? The defense is good. The defense is great. The run game is great. And they're not really, they're kind of easing Nico into this thing. But what I think has been apparent the last few weeks is that either Josh Heupel, and this is no disrespect, this is not Josh Heupel's a bad coach. Josh Heupel's a great coach. But it was either Josh Heupel didn't trust Nico, Josh Heupel didn't think Nico was capable, and you had the weird Arkansas game where they just couldn't get anything going. You had the Florida game where Nico didn't look great. And I know there's going to be stats out there that indicate that, if you just look at the stat sheet, it doesn't look like Nico played his best game, okay? But at the same time, if you watch the game, he was a different player in the second half, picked up several big plays with his feet, and then I think as importantly, was just throwing the ball all over the yard, right? I mean, first of all, 24 second half points in that game. And I think beyond that, just a couple big time throws in that game. The pass to take the lead late in the fourth quarter to Chris Brazell, as good of a pass as you can throw. And that was a throw that I don't know if he has the confidence to make 3-4 weeks ago. And so to me, this is why I'm excited if I'm a Tennessee fan, because I'm looking at this team. I'm looking at how good the run game was, how good the defense has been. And the whole question was, if you get Nico going too, oh, baby, it's a wrap. You're going to be in really good shape. And so now he plays his best game against a great opponent. Now you got to buy. And if you can keep this momentum going, there's no telling what this team is capable of. Because, again, with Nico playing the way maybe he did against Arkansas, it's no disrespect. It's just the truth. You're a team that maybe you can make the playoff, but can you really do damage once you get there? If you can get Nico going over these next few weeks, if you can get him more confident, you have 5 more regular season games, maybe an SEC championship game the way things are going. And on top of that, if you make the playoff, that's several more weeks of practice. Think about how good and how much more confident Nico can be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 weeks down the road when you could still be playing football. So to me, great win for Tennessee. You deserve all the props. You deserve all the credit. And my goodness, what a game. What a victory. I hope you enjoyed it. But I'm here to say, 1, the program is obviously in great shape. But 2, if you can get Nico playing at that next level, I think that has to get you excited for the rest of the season ahead. All right. Wanted to give Tennessee their props. Want to give Tennessee their credit. But we got to talk Bama, okay? So Bama loses this game 24-17. And I'll say this. I think we were a little bit ahead of this on this show last week. The Vandy game, I gave a total pass for, okay? But then after the Vandy game, I said basically, listen, I don't think whatever. Vandy game, I said 1 loss, whatever. But South Carolina, you could see this team was struggling. You could see this team was taking a step back. And so to lose for Kalen DeBoer for a second time in 3 games, but to me, this isn't a knock on Tennessee. Tennessee's great. More importantly, it's the way your players are acting. It's some of your decision-making. And people can criticize me, and people could say, Torres, you're overreacting. I think this program is regressing. I think this program is getting softer. And I think this program, everything that Nick Saban built this program on, is slowly slipping away and falling through the cracks, okay? And so let's talk about this game a little bit from the Alabama perspective. Let me start by saying this. Obviously, the play that everybody is going to talk about, we know what it was. It was the 4th and 22 play late in the game. Again, I think every Alabama fan would know the circumstances surrounding the 4th and 22. But Alabama, trailing 21-17, is at their own 18-yard line, deep in their own territory, trailing by 4 with under 2 minutes to go. Now, it's worth noting Kalen DeBoer had all 3 of his timeouts, and I think we all thought, okay, he's going to punt the football away, going to try to use those timeouts, try to get the ball back, and try to win the game. And that's what I think most coaches would do. Instead, Kalen DeBoer decides to go for it. Now, I understand the argument of, hey, we got to score a touchdown one way or the other. But to me, first of all, I mean, listen, I'm not a coach, okay? I'm not perfect. Just fundamentally don't agree with the decision. Because with the decision, I mean, you punt the football, you get the stop, you keep 3 points off the board. You're going to get the ball in a more advantageous spot, whereas the circumstances where they went for it on 4th and 18 or 4th and 22, excuse me, was in a situation where you're basically giving Tennessee a chip shot field goal. Then you're going to get the ball back with worse field position, no timeouts, and you got to drive the length of the field just to tie the game. Then you got to beat him in overtime. So I didn't like the call, but I think there's something more important that's being missed in Kalen DeBoer's decision to go for 4th and 22. Why was it a 4th and 22? Because Kendrick Law got the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. Would have been a 4th and 7. Then it becomes a 4th and 22 with the 15-yard penalty. And so to me, that tells me 2 things. One, DeBoer in his head was planning to go for it. 4th and 8 is a lot different than 4th and 22. I don't care who you have to, as a coach, be able to change your opinion, your circumstances, whatever, based on what's going on in the game. And so it was clear that he was nervous, or maybe, I don't want to say that he was nervous, but it was clear that he was planning to go for it on 4th and 8, 4th and 7, wasn't accounting for a 15-yard penalty. But 2, let's talk about the 15-yard penalty. It wasn't a perfect call, Bama fans. I get it. It should have been a dual, unsportsmanlike, whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that in the most crucial moment of the game, one of your key players, an older player, has been in the program, is supposed to be a leader, gets a penalty at the worst possible time. And I'm sorry, to me, this is continuing a trend. And I know what Bama fans are going to say. 2 years ago, under Nick Saban, this was one of the most penalized teams in college football. Nick Saban couldn't figure it out the year they had Bryce Young and Will Anderson. I don't care. Look at what's going on in this program right now. You had the Kendrick Law penalty late in the game. You had the video of Malachi Moore a few weeks ago, as you know you're going to lose to Vandy, kicks the ball down the field. Yes, he apologized. I give him credit for owning up to it like a man. Doesn't change the fact that it's still stupid, inappropriate behavior. By the way, did you see the Alabama, I believe it was an assistant coach, walking into the stadium with a cigar? Remember, cigars, of course, are given to the winner of this game. This is embarrassing behavior, and let me take it a step further. It is the erosion of every single thing that this program was built on under Nick Saban. Bottom line, if you can distill Nick Saban's entire ethos into one sentence, it's this. It's the process. We know what the process is. What is the process? The process is do the little stuff right, and the big stuff takes care of itself. Well, now, Alabama certainly ain't doing the little stuff right. 15 penalties, 115 yards, kicking the football against Vandy, unsportsmanlike conduct, coaches walking in the building with cigars. That's the exact opposite of the process. And so to me, this is where I would be concerned with as a Bama fan. It's not the second straight loss. It's not the second loss in 3 games. That's not what would concern me. It's that every single week you get further away from what made Bama Bama and Bama different than everybody else in college football. You're getting away from it. And the other thing that scares me, listen, I'm not a parent, but whether you're a parent, a teacher, a dog owner, a cat owner, a football coach, whatever, you know what the standard is in whatever you're doing, okay? You know that once you let one thing slide, then all of a sudden it can become a recurring thing. If producer Matt just didn't show up one day for work and I let it slide, what's to stop him from doing it again? I don't think you would, producer Matt. I see you in the background. You're a good guy. You always show up ready to go. But if producer Matt doesn't show up and I'm just like, okay, let's get him tomorrow, that becomes a problem. I mean, listen, we're going to talk about Indiana in a minute. Look at Curt Cignetti. Curt Cignetti They were up 42-7. You can find the tweet that I had. We don't need to show the tweet now, Matt, but we'll show it when we talk Indiana. But Curt Cignetti is pacing the sidelines, pissed out of his mind, and Indiana was up 42-7 against Nebraska. And he was unhappy, and then he was unhappy with how his second string was playing, so he put back in the starters. That's what a standard looks like, and that standard, again, is eroding under Kalen DeBoer. Now, it's worth noting a couple other things. We can't solely blame Kalen DeBoer because I will say, I just don't think the offense is good enough. Part of that is on the previous coach. I just don't think there's enough talent on that roster. I've said for 2 weeks now, what have I said about Alabama? I've said if you can take Ryan Williams out of the game, the star freshman wide receiver, they don't really have much. Their offense is basically two things. Can Jalen Milroe make plays with his legs? And if not, can he throw the ball up and can Ryan Williams go get it? Well, Jalen Milroe held to 11 yards rushing on 14 carries this week. Not surprising if you watch the South Carolina game. He got beat up in that game. Ryan Williams, 16 targets, by the way. Did you see, by the way, speaking of the standard, some of the other, I think it was Caleb Odom, the wide receiver, tweeting about how unhappy and unfair it is that Ryan Williams got all those targets? And so I just bring it up because the standard is eroding. But at the same time, it's also not just the standard. I don't think there's enough talent on the offense. I don't see anything special outside of Ryan Williams and Jalen Milroe when he runs. And I'll also say, you hate to be a jerk to any individual kid. I just don't think Jalen Milroe is good enough. I'll be honest, I don't think he's ever been good enough. Doesn't mean he's a bad kid. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. But like I started seeing some first round overall pick type stuff. I'm sorry, I don't see it. And I actually think if Kalen DeBoer deserves credit for anything, he's really coached around the fact that Jalen Milroe is not a great, thrower of the football. By the way, Alabama had to do that last year, but the defense was so good and the run game was so good it didn't matter. But in this game, Jalen Milroe, you see what it's like when he can't make plays with his legs. 25 of 45 passing, 239 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. So I just bring it up. We can keep going. We don't have to keep belaboring the Alabama point. This thing is going in the wrong direction. It's going in the wrong direction in a hurry. And I just don't think, I think part of this is, I think part of this is that it falls on the head coach. It falls on a lot of people, but it also falls on the fact that this standard is just not being met right now. Really quickly, going to send out a tweet. I'll cut this out in half a second. We're going to get to the rest of the college football weekend. I'm coming back. All right. Let's keep the conversation going. How about this? How about I do all right, everybody, I'm back. Gonna be back. By the way, keep dropping your comments and we'll get to some of your comments at the end of the show. Do want to switch gears though. We've talked a lot about 4 teams specifically over 40 minutes. So we had a jam-packed weekend. But at the same time, I actually want to talk about 2 teams. Oh boy, it ain't pretty, okay? Let's go ahead and dive in. And I think so here's the thing. Oklahoma got absolutely destroyed by South Carolina on Saturday. USC lost another game to a Big Ten opponent on the road that isn't very good in Maryland. And so I had a lot of people, Torres, you going to talk about Oklahoma? Torres, you going to talk about Southern Cal? Well, I'll tell you what. They have one thing that's tying them together. Lincoln Riley is the former Oklahoma head coach. He's now at USC. Because Lincoln Riley is at USC, that means Brent Venables is the head coach at Oklahoma. So I just bring it up because rather than talk about these 2 teams individually, individual segments, let's just ask a simple question. Which program is in worse shape right now? I don't think there's a great answer, but I think it's worth discussing. Oklahoma 4-3, USC 3-4, and that Oklahoma 4-3, by the way, is totally fraudulent. If Peyton Thornton throw a pick 6 at the worst possible time, they lose to Auburn. They're not good. Who do they struggle with? Houston or somebody early in the season. Neither program is good. Both fan bases are turning on the coaches. And it is not pretty for those 2 teams. And so what's interesting is it's fascinating to break this down from the Oklahoma perspective. That South Carolina, I've never seen anything like the South Carolina game, okay? Because the South Carolina game, For people who weren't watching, and unless you're a South Carolina or Oklahoma fan, I don't know why you would. You know that Oklahoma, I've never seen this, was down. This is an insane stat. Oklahoma was down 21-0 at the 9:30 mark of the first quarter. Oklahoma was down 21-0 for 5 minutes into the game, not even 5 minutes into the game. If you missed it, opening drive, South Carolina scores, then a fumble recovery for a touchdown, then a pick six for a touchdown. Michael Hawkins ultimately gets benched. He, of course, replaced Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold comes back in. It doesn't really get that much better under Jackson Arnold. They finished the game without a touchdown, without finding the end zone. They did finish with 291 yards, but 3 field goals is the only offense that they have. And I'll say this, felt like Oklahoma fans wanted to believe in Brent Venables because he is not Lincoln Riley. Well, it ain't very pretty under Brent Venables. Here's the thing, though. It ain't pretty under Lincoln Riley either. And listen, if there's an Oklahoma fan in this chat or watches this clip after, go back and look. I was wrong on Lincoln Riley, too. I got to own it. I thought Lincoln Riley would be unbelievable. These stats on Lincoln Riley are insane, okay? So first of all, they lose to Maryland. Crazy game. Like every game this season, they were up and in control at half, or basically every game that they've played this season. Second half, they continue to fall apart. And with it, this is one of the most jarring stats I've ever seen, okay? Year one, they go 11-3. Remember, if Caleb Williams doesn't get hurt in the Pac-12 championship game, they probably make the 12-team playoff. He gets hurt, they go 11-3. They started 6-0 last year. They finished 8-5 overall. They're 3-5 this year, which means that if my math is correct, and I know that it is, they are now 5-9 since starting 6-0 last year. They are 5-9 in their last 14 games. And here is the crazy stat that I came across last night. Clay Helton, who we all agree was a disaster, never once finished, and it never once had a 14-game stretch where he was 5-9 or worse. So that tells you how bad things are. They're 0-3 on the road, 3 trips to the, I guess, Eastern or Central time zones, lost to Minnesota. The Michigan gets worse by the week, lose to Maryland. I guess don't play teams named that start with M on the road, and you might be good. But this is a disaster. And so now to the question, who's actually in worse shape? Because I think it's an interesting conversation. Oklahoma's kind of interesting because I'll say this about Oklahoma. To me, and this goes to something, my buddy Colin Cowherd says this all the time. He says, my number one indicator of a coach is your side of the football at least doing okay, right? So take Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick, down to the end, you could criticize the quarterback play, the offense, his ability to draft wide receivers, whatever. That defense was always elite. Sean McVay, even when they've struggled, it's not because of the offense. You go on and on down the list. And so I will give Venables credit. The defense has been good. And what is clear, they just need to completely upgrade the offensive line. Because to me, I don't really know, are they this bad? Because the defense is good. Defense held South Carolina under 250 yards yesterday. You take out the 2 defensive touchdowns, we're sitting at a, what are we sitting at? 35 minus 14 is 21 points. 21-9 feels a lot different, even if it's disappointing. But you can't move the football. We don't know if Jackson Arnold is the quarterback. By the way, I mentioned it early in the show, but for people who are watching this as a standalone clip, yes, I am aware that the offensive coordinator has been fired. But part of this is what happened last offseason, okay? And listen, I know Oklahoma fans are tired of hearing about this, but I'm sorry. The Dillon Gabriel decision, if Venables doesn't make it, the decision to let Dillon Gabriel walk last offseason is going to go down as one of the great disasters in the history of college football, okay? I understand the circumstances. I understand that you were expecting him to go pro. You were ready to hand the baton to Jackson Arnold, okay? I understand that he didn't get the feedback he wanted. We're in an NIL era, and he decided to leave. But part of it was also you kind of promised Jackson Arnold. And I even understand the context of you get if Jackson Arnold hits, you get 2 years of Jackson Arnold versus 1 year of Dillon Gabriel. Here's my counter to that. We need a new rule in college football. We need a new rule where if you have a quarterback who just completed 70+% of his passes with 30 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and led you to a 10-win season, and he has eligibility and he wants to play college football, and you're a Power 5 team, I'm not talking about your Akron or UL Monroe or whatever, and you have the money to pay him, you freaking pay him. So to me, don't blame the offensive coordinator. Blame yourself. You let Dylan Gabriel walk out the door. But ultimately, I still think if you can get that O-line cleaned up, I don't think you're that bad because that defense is at least taking care of business. With USC's problems are everywhere. First off, it's kind of ironic, right? Is the idea that, Oklahoma is losing because they kind of ran off a quarterback. Lincoln Riley actually kind of made the opposite decision last year. They were recruiting quarterbacks in the portal. I believe at one point they had Will Howard on campus, and they instead decided Miller Moss had a great bowl game. And I was an advocate of this, by the way, so I'm not sitting here saying I have all the answers. But they said Miller Moss, maybe he is a starter at the Power 5 level, Power 4 level, whatever. They decided to keep him. Well, now he's not really good enough. But here's the crazy part about SC. It's a team-wide problem. First off, the defense, which we all thought was kind of fixed and figured out, not very good. And it's not even that they're not good. For whatever, they can't make adjustments in the second half. They were up 20-6 at halftime against Penn State, end up losing 33-30. Not great at math means Penn State gave up 27, or Penn freaking State scored 27 points in the third quarter, fourth quarter, and overtime to win. That's not good enough. By the way, you got killed by a tight end. I'm not a scheme guy, but how did a tight end finish with 17 catches for however many yards? And then, of course, this past game against Maryland, you were in control and you couldn't get off the field defensively. So this is a disaster. I think USC is in worse shape. Oklahoma's recruiting better. Oklahoma at least has the offensive line, or at least has the defense figured out. They got to get the offensive line right, and maybe they have a chance. USC is a debacle. I don't think it's getting better. I don't even know what the answers are because I don't think Miller Moss is good enough, but the O-line isn't good enough, but the defense isn't taking care of business. It is a disaster for USC. By the way, USC is playing on Friday night this week. For people who don't know, I live in Los Angeles. Was thinking about going to that game. Probably going to go ahead and pass on that one, especially, by the way, I'm just warning you. The crowd there might not be very good on Friday night. Game 1 of the World Series. As I'm recording here, we're about to have Game 6 of the NLCS. If the Dodgers are in that World Series, I don't think you're going to get very many fans at the USC game. Don't want to jinx the Dodgers, by the way, but that's the truth. All right, very quickly, let's rip through some of the rest of the college football schedule and the weekend that we just had. And let's start with the team of the hour, the team of the moment, the story of the moment. We got to talk Indiana football. And I don't want to say that this is the first time that we've ever talked Indiana football, because the truth is we have talked Indiana football. The year they had Michael Penix when they were pretty good. This podcast, I don't even know if it was on YouTube yet. We were strictly an audio podcast. But this is the first time we've talked about Indiana in this context as they win 56-7 in a statement victory, big noon kickoff. And that guy you see on your screen, Coach Sig, that man right there, he is the belle of the ball in college football right now. After Bama lost, I saw Bama fans calling to get him as your head coach. I saw some Auburn fans saying, let's go get him. Arkansas fans aren't happy with Sam Pittman. So you talk about a guy that could have options after the season if he wants them. I mean, listen, Alabama and Auburn aren't opening up. Arkansas might. I don't think he'd take Arkansas. Whatever. The only point I'm trying to make, if he wants options, he's going to have them, but he is a rock star, okay? And what was so impressive about this game is a couple things. First of all, it's easy to forget. And our Torres on Indiana account tweeted this out. Make sure you're following at Torres on Indiana. But the thing that was most impressive about this game is that it was a 6.5 point spread. Everyone now is using revisionist history and saying it was disrespectful to Indiana. Well, not in hindsight, you can say that. Nebraska came into this game with a top 10 defense nationally, okay? Indiana destroyed them. But what was crazy about this game, why I believe it was okay to at least question Indiana coming into this game, they hadn't faced a top 60 defense all year. So this was by far the best defense that they had played all year. And they finished the game with 56 points and in total with 495 yards of total offense, 250 yards rushing, 6.5 yards per carry. And it just shows who this guy is, what he's about. Indiana fans know this, but the quote of the century at Big Ten Media Day, he's asked about how is he going to win at Indiana. He says, I win everywhere. Google me. That was an exact quote. By the way, I didn't even see this. When he was introduced after taking the job, He went to an Indiana basketball game. First thing he says was, yeah, I'm here to win, and Purdue sucks, which, after my interactions with Purdue fans, that's a man after my heart. But they get the win, and I just think this guy has proven. Listen, it's a small sample size, but he's won everywhere he went. And what was so impressive to me, and I think especially in light of what happened with Bama, the standard that this man has set. Producer Matt, go ahead and throw up my tweet from yesterday when you get a second. Indiana was up at one point 42-7. Of course they were, because they won 56-7. And Curt Cignetti is pacing the sidelines, angry, furious. And I tweeted out, life lesson, when your coach has this look and you're up 42-7, you have the right coach. Indiana fans loved it. America loved it at last glance. It had 300-something retweets and 15,000 likes, but it's the truth. We just talked about it with DeBoer. You set a standard and you hold everyone to it every second of every day. By the way, early in the game, Jenny Taft on the sideline goes up to him and asks him about whatever. They're up like 21-7, 21-0, whatever. And he's like, well, we did this wrong. We did that wrong. We did this wrong. We did that wrong. We need to work on this. We need to get better at that. That's a ball coach right there, man. And I'm so excited for this Indiana team. Now, the disappointing thing, it's obviously worth noting, is the injury to Curtis Rourke. It was his throwing hand. We'll see what happens. Good news, Taven Jackson, who, of course, for people who do not know, Taven Jackson is Trace Jackson Davis's brother. He came in and looked phenomenal as well. Finished 7 of 8 passing, 91 yards, 3 touchdown passes, so they didn't miss a beat without him. We'll see what happens. They have an interesting game with Washington this week. But what's interesting about Indiana, if they take care of business, here is the rest of their schedule as they sit at 7-0. Washington at home, bye. At Michigan State, Washington State, or Washington this week, in Michigan State, Michigan at home, at Ohio, bye into Ohio State, and then Purdue to wrap the season. Listen, at Ohio State, it's going to be tough for any team in the country, whether it's Georgia, Indiana, UConn, whoever. But every other game, they will be favored. We saw how bad Michigan is. Michigan's terrible, okay? They're going to be favored against Michigan. They will likely be favored in 4 of their last 5 games. And I'll say this, they get to 11-1, they're probably playing in the Big Ten championship game. And even if they're not, they're in the playoff conversation. There's a possibility they could go 10-2. And depending on how things break off, they could be in the playoff conversation as well. Credit Curt Cignetti. Indiana is for real. If you used whatever today is, look at that on the screen if you're watching. We got the Coach Sig. You talk about just an incredible, incredible graphic. That's Coach Sig right there. But I'll tell you this, Indiana, get ready. They could be in the college football playoff. This guy's the national coach of the year. This is the story of the year in college football, except maybe for one other thing we'll get to in a minute. Unbelievable stuff. Really quickly, 2 other games I want to hit on. First of all, Florida, Kentucky. Okay. So this is a series that Kentucky has actually dominated pretty regularly. They had one, I forget the stats now because they lost, but what was it? 3 in a row. Billy Napier was 0-2 against Kentucky. 3 of the last 4 at the Swamp, Kentucky has actually won. You talk about Billy Napier and the Florida Gators, man. They made a statement, 48-20 final score. They get the victory. Listen, DJ Lagway is the story. 197 yards rushing, 4.5 yards per carry. We got to give the Florida Gators credit. Let me give Billy Napier a little credit. I crushed him all off season. I crushed him after Miami. Crushed him after Texas A&M. But out of the bye, they have been a completely different team. UCF, they were a home underdog. Destroyed UCF. It wasn't competitive. They didn't even – Billy Napier called off the dogs in the second half, okay? Tennessee, 17.5-point road favorite. Go to overtime, lose in overtime. And then, of course, this past week, you're facing Kentucky, home underdog. You take care of business. You put up 48 points and get the victory. I think what's interesting is this. Even with the win, we're 7 games in, you're 4-3 overall, you have a bye. But I think DJ Lagway is going to save this guy's job. I really do. And we're setting up for a very interesting scenario. And by the way, DJ Lagway, the freshman quarterback, I believed you should have gone to him sooner. What do I know? I'm just a dude with a mic, pretty popular podcast, whatever. I'm just saying. But at the same time, I thought he should have gone to DJ Lagway earlier, but it doesn't change the fact that you never want to see Graham Mertz go down with injury. But this kind of worked out perfectly. You're 4-3. Again, I'm not saying it worked out perfectly because Graham Mertz got injured, but DJ Lagway got enough runway where he wasn't forced into action, where he got a little bit of confidence, and he looks really good. Now, I know the stat sheet doesn't overwhelm you in terms of what he did, 7 of 13, 259 yards passing, no touchdowns, but he made some big boy throws last night, made some big boy throws at Tennessee last week, made some big boy throws in his only other start against Samford. And I think transparently it's going to save Billy Napier's job because obviously if you keep Billy Napier, you probably keep this kid. And if you can keep this kid, you got a chance going forward. You lose Billy Napier, this kid's going to hit the portal. Doesn't mean that he'll leave Florida, but he's going to hit the portal. And you might be starting over from scratch. And it might be a really big rebuild. And it might be you might just be digging yourself deeper. And so the one thing I've said two things about Florida. Consistently, I think most of the fan base does not want to start over. And Billy Napier just had to give him a part of a reason to do it. And two, obviously with the turmoil with the administration, school president leaves, interim president, I don't think they want to go through this. And so I just bring it up because I actually think Billy Napier is probably going to keep his job. Now, what's interesting, look at the schedule, okay? So Florida, their final 5 games, they have a bye this week, Georgia in Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU are their next 3 games. Those are 3 teams in the top 10. They're all playing really well. And then you close with Florida State. Florida State's a debacle, okay? There is one game in the middle, what I'm going to get to in a minute. But you're 4-3 now. If you lose the next 3, which I think are possible, because those are all really good teams, you're 4-6. If you take Florida State as a win, you know what that means? You play Ole Miss at home. Could beating Lane Kiffin be the thing that keeps Billy Napier and allows Billy Napier to keep his job? It's an interesting thought. We'll get there. And I'll say this, I think Florida's going to be competitive against some of these other teams, but man, oh man, well, you talk about a tough final next 3 games, Georgia at Texas, LSU. I think they're playing much better. I don't know if you can win some of those games, but I'll tell you what, if you play Tennessee tough on the road, you can maybe potentially win at home or on a neutral field. I don't think you're beating Georgia, but you get the point. Really quickly, a couple other games. One, speaking of LSU, I just got to give them credit, man. Listen, I've been a Brian Kelly guy, but I don't think I didn't think they were that good. But you go to Arkansas, it's never really competitive. You win 34-10. You're sitting at 6. LSU freaking football is sitting at 6-1 right now. And if Brian Kelly's stupid administration would stop scheduling them tough games in week 1, they'd be 7-0 and probably like a top 3 team in the country right now, probably number 2 behind Oregon. Doesn't mean that they're the second best team in the country, and I'm not saying duck competition, but I was thinking about this. Year 1, Brian Kelly loses the season opener, finishes 10-4 because they lost in the SEC championship game, but finished 10-4 overall. Year 2, losing the opener, finished 10-3 overall. This year, sitting at 6-1 overall after losing in the opener. If LSU would just schedule Akron or Troy or UL Monroe or whoever, instead of giving Brian Kelly all these tough games, let's say he won those 3 season openers. You're talking about an 11-3, 11-2, 7-0 right now. And we're probably talking about Brian Kelly. Is he the best coach in college football? So it's just not better than Kirby, but you get the point. I just think it's something worth noting, but this team has consistently gotten better every single year, every single season as the season has gone on. BK, just cancel these early season games. By the way, for people who don't know, next 2 years, they play Clemson on the road, Clemson at home to open the season. I think LSU is crazy. Get BK an early season opener. I think they get a chance to win. Listen, this show is going on, and Donna just said in the chat, and she's right. I love college football, man. I've been talking for 59 minutes and 14 seconds. We'll get out of here on this. Let's just wrap with the coolest story in college football. I say it every week. Army destroys whoever. Navy destroys whoever. They're a combined 13-0. Believe I saw this stat. I'd give credit to the person if I knew who put it out. I believe this is the first time that Army and Navy are undefeated this late in a season since 1926. Okay? 1926. Unbelievable. Coolest story in college football. Now, it'll be interesting because they both have Notre Dame on the schedule, starting with Navy playing Notre Dame this coming weekend. So Navy is a significant underdog, but man, oh man, these are the two best teams in the AAC right now. They could be, depending on how things go. Listen, Boise and UNLV are going to have a say in it. Boise and UNLV play this weekend, but could this be the highest ranked Group of 5 champion? Could they play for a trip to the college football playoff, then have to play the next weekend again? I don't know what else there is to add. It's unbelievable, but this is just awesome. All right, I'll tell you what. I think I'm going to mostly get out of here. A couple questions from the chat. Let's see here. Going back to the Texas situation, Charles asked, do teams get fined? Yes, teams get fined. It's not enough, okay? It's not enough because how is it not a penalty? I don't understand how it's not a penalty. We talked about it earlier in the show. If you missed it, go back and check it out. Let's see here. Bama Red says Bama has the #1 recruiting class coming in 2025. And listen, nothing's going to happen with Kalen DeBoer. I'm not saying it will. All I am saying is, like, I would just sit back and say, what is happening with this guy? And the standard is not to the standard that it has been. And that's not good enough, and that's not acceptable. And so my big question is, what does Kalen DeBoer look like with a better quarterback? Whether it's Keelan Russell, the #1 quarterback in America, according to some services this year. Is it Austin Mack who's on the roster? I don't know. But it's bad. It's really bad. Got to be better. Really quickly, Army, Navy for a spot in the college football playoff. It could happen. It could happen. All right, I'll tell you what, I think I'm going to get out of here. We've done an hour and 10 minutes at this point. Do appreciate everybody's support. We're going to go. Whoa. I was going to get out of here without shouting out my good friends and my partners at Collie Puffs. Before we get out of here, got to give a quick shout out to Collie Puffs. Love Collie Puffs. Appreciate Collie Puffs. Collie Puffs are incredible, okay? So it's football season. You're on the couch. You're trying to figure out, okay, like, hey, on the couch all day Saturday, on the couch all day Sunday, Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football. This week we got 2 Monday Night Football games. And all you want to do is stuff your face, relax, enjoy football. Here's the problem. You stuff your face enough, you're not looking too good. Come bikini season, come sunbathing season, whatever. That's where Collie Puffs come in. They are a healthy snack. They are also delicious. Great story here, okay? Family-owned business, not far from where I live. The owner, Joey, is a football fan, Rams season ticket holder. I think he might have been at the Rams-Raiders game on Saturday or Sunday. I could be wrong. But he is a football fan like you. He's trying to eat healthy. He's trying to make sure his kids eat healthy, and he created Collie Puffs, okay? These are baked, not fried. Absolutely delicious. Made with healthy ingredients, and that's their big selling point. That's all you need to know, is that basically they taste good, but they're also healthy for you. You can't find very many snacks that taste good but are healthy for you. So go ahead, check out Collie Puffs. More information at colliepuffs.com. You can also get them on Amazon as well. Thank you to Collie Puffs. All right, I think it's time for me to get out of here. Just did an hour 5 off the top of my head. I'm not bragging. I'm not calling myself a hero, but I'm kind of a hero, all right? So this is what I need you to do. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Aaron Torres pod. If you're watching on YouTube, click the little subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. Also, subscribe to the podcast. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Rate, review the show. We're going to get out of here. I'm wiped. I got to eat. Going to go eat some Collie Puffs. Thank you for your support. Thank you to Blue Chew as well, bluechew.com, promo code Torres. That's all for today's show. Appreciate everybody's support. We will be back on Tuesday. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back. New episode, Aaron Torres Pod.